Okay, Dreamflighters, we have made our first star, A1. This is the only star we will make during this entire process, how we make the quilt, how we make Dreamflight. And the reason is, I think all the stars are the same. So for me, the essential part is that you know how you work with your seam allowance, that you know that you have to lift the fabric that is on top to get the points match, how you assemble the stars together to make your 4 pairs, 2 halves and 1 beautiful star. So every time when you make a star, this is the method, and it doesn't matter how complicated your star is, making that points, making the pairs, making the halves and the center star is always the same. So if you are hesitate to start with a new star, always go back to the little YouTube tutorials, and it tells you exactly what to do. So now we are going to A2, and that is that big spiky circle, and the spiky circle is the one that you will see here. Or maybe it's better to say, Bridget, we have one here. That is the spiky circle, and we need fabric 4, that is the green fabric, and fabric 2. The templates, however, you will find the templates, remember that first page, A2-1 and A2 on sheet 7. So I already pre-cut them, and then I go back and I see that I fabric 2 is 2 strips of 2 by 42, and for fabric 4, that is the, I would say, green fabric, we need 3 strips, 2 strips of 3 inch by 42. It tells you exactly how we make it, how you use your fabrics, but I like to demo how I make my spikes, because I think most quilters are more visual, and I really like to show you how I do it. So I take my booklet away, and I love to show you what I'm going to do. If you look at your pieces, we have 2 A2 parts, A2-1 and A2-2. And the first section, A2-1, goes from 1 to 35, and then from 36 to 66. First we make this half, and we start here. At the end we will tape this half onto the tape line of A2. We match them very carefully, then you turn the piece this way. I hope that I can show it here. And then we start from here all the way down. You also can see that the arrows are turned as well, so it gives you an idea. You will see the marks. The marks are important for that big center star that we just made, and here is what we have on the outside. You also can see that you go always into your seam allowance. That is an essential part. Always start and end in your seam allowance. Okay, shall we give it a try? I don't need this one, so I start with this part. Okay, Bridget, let's see. What I do, I place my first piece maybe in a little bit in an offset position. For me, it is important that I do have enough fabric. So what I have, fabric 4 and fabric 2. And remember, when we start with the star points that I said, there is a golden rule. You always start with the first fabric on top for foundation point 1, and that means that that is fabric 4. So if I look at this to give you an idea, this is the offset position. It is a little bit bigger than the spike. So if I do this, I place them on top of her, and I place my piece onto the fabric, and you can see we do have a little bit of leftover. I will start here with my little tiny back stitch all the way down and look at my arrows, and I will end up here with my back stitch. Okay. I use a stitch length 1.5 to make it easier to tear the paper. So I take, okay. There's my little back stitch. Just try to stay onto the line all the way to the end. go into the seam allowance and I do my back stitch. Okay, that is the first step. Now I only cut the one that is on top, and again give it a little bit of extra. This is what we do. You can see we do have a beautiful seam. And now I finger press. I do a lot of finger pressing when I paper piece. It is not necessary to press or iron every piece. Okay, so I trim the little head. And now, okay, right side facing up, and I focus on the line between 2 and 3. And the only thing I do, oh, I'm sorry, I have to turn the fabric. And the only thing I do, put the point in here in the widest part of number 3 here. And if you look, you can see we do have a 1/4 of an inch here, and if you extend this line in your head, we do have a 1/4 of an inch here. This is the reason that I make my fabric strip a little bit wider. Gives you the idea that we can be a little bit more sparingly. Okay, now I fold the paper and I cut off the white fabric. Again, you can use your edit 1/4, or what I do, eyeball that 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And again, finger press as best as you can. Don't leave any fabrics in your seam. If you leave fabric in your seam, you will shorten the length of your point. If I do this, it gives you an idea what to do. So imagine that you leave extra fabric in your point, your point will end up like this instead of this. So really, finger press as best as you can. Don't leave any fabric in your point. Now we can cut off this. Drop my strip. Your next step, that is a leftover piece, and as you can see, foundation point 4, the widest part will be here and the point will be here. And the only thing we have to do, you take your piece, focus on the line between number 3 and number 4, and you place her on the right side of your little strip. You can see we do have a 1/4 of an inch here, from here to here, and again start with your back stitch all the way down to the ends. So this is how I make, this is how I paper piece. I never pin. It is a fast way. I'm not using an edit 1/4 ruler. It's a very basic way of how to paper piece. And I always try to avoid wasting a lot of fabric. What I say, fabric is expensive. And again, we finger press as best as we can. Use your thumbnail, and now we cut off the bottom. So what do you think? This is how we do it. Now I take my piece again. Okay, To start with this right side, this is the right side. Okay, this is the bottom of my piece. This is the bottom of my strip. That is the top. And for this half, we use the bottom of the strip and the bottom of the piece. Then you always have that leftover piece that you need. So the only thing we do now, focus on the line between 4 and 5. And the only thing you do, just place her on the right side of the piece. You can see from here 1/4 of an inch. You can see from here to here 1/4 of an inch. Start with your back stitch and move on. Okay, I have finished the first half. This is A21. And I'd like to show you the next step for A22. I already introduced it a little bit, but the next step, we will tape number 36 on top of the tape line of part A22. I have a little piece of tape. I cut it in half because we do not need a big piece of tape. I try to work as precise as I can. I think she looks pretty good this way. Okay. There's the first half. There's the other half. So this is what I need. A small piece of tape, and now we can go on. So this was fabric 4 and 36 is fabric 2. And remember what I say, when it's fabric 2, when we turn the piece, you can see the little arrows. Here they go this way, but now they go down. And that means, and that's what I would like to show you, this is my leftover piece of my first half. Now this will be the bottom of my piece. Pay attention to it. Okay, and I will show you why. I will cut this. Makes it a little bit easier for you to see what I'm doing. I will do this as well. I just give it a rough cut just to show you what we are doing. So I place my little piece underneath. The bottom of the piece is here. I start there with my tiny back stitch all the way down, and I end up in the seam allowance with my back stitch. Okay. And this is how you can continue with A21 and A22. And this is the way you do with all your pieces when they've been cut in half. There's always a moment that you're able to tape them together. Again, I like to use my scissor instead of an edge quarter, but finger press the best as you can. Now we take this piece. Okay, and remember that in the beginning I said this is the bottom of the piece and you start with the green here, but now she is the top of the piece because number 37 is here. She is on top of the strip because it is the top of the curve now. And then you will have that leftover piece that we need. So we can try to avoid a lot of waste. And you also can see that when you do it this way, you not only don't waste as much, but also you do not have to pin. And now you can see we do have a leftover piece here that is big enough to make a new spike. And again, finger press as best as you can. Number 38. It's the line between 37 and 38. this is the one. This is the bottom of my white spike. This is the bottom of my strip. The only thing I do, I take my piece and I place her on top of it. If I extend this line, I will have 1/4 of an inch. If I extend this line, I will have 1/4 of an inch here. But let's see if it works. If you do this, you can use smaller pieces than you ever thought of. You never run out of fabric. Okay. Is that white piece enough to cover my 38s? And I think it is. Because if I look at this and if I fold her, it will tell you that she is big enough. So we have no waste, and it really makes the difference in the amount of fabric you need. There's my leftover piece. 39. Place her in the point, the widest part of 39, the widest part of 39. The point between 38 and 40 will be here. So take your piece, and the only thing you have to do is place her on the right sides. There is your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Maybe in the beginning it is different, it is strange, but if you see how fast it could be, you will love this method. And I'm still working with my first strip. Okay, will she be enough? I can tell you, she will be. And again, finger press as best as you can. Give her that little bit of extra. And if I fold her now on the line between 38 and 40, again, you can see that we do have more than enough fabric as a seam allowance. That's what I want to show you. I will finish her, I will sew them together, and then we can start assembling the star and A2. So this is what I want to show you. I hope you will have a good time. So let's make A2 the way I did it. Be sparingly with your fabrics, and I think we will have a beautiful piece at the end. Okay, let's start. We are ready for the next step. We have made our beautiful star, and now we have made A2. So A1 is there and A2. As you can see, I have finished the second part, but now we have to get rid of that extra fabric on the outside. I never cut my fabric with my scissor. I always will use my rotary cutter for this. I personally have the feeling that I can work so much more precise than with a scissor. So follow me and it tells you exactly what to do. I will start on the outside, and the reason is the curve on the outside is a little bit easier, especially when you haven't done it enough. So take your time and place your blade exactly on the outside line. And now you can see that the sharp blade really make this task easier for you. I think it will look very nice. And again, turn the piece slowly and stay exactly on the line. If you cut your piece nice and exactly on the line, you will have a perfect seam allowance. If you get into your seam, you create problems you don't want. And again, because we cut a piece a smidge from the outside, it really makes a difference, because now you can cut off the extra fabric and you have a good side on that seam, on that solid line. You also can see all the little marks. The little marks are important. They are important when we start assembling the star A1 and A2 together. So when we have finished this and the inside circle, we will bring the marks onto the fabric. And then there's something else that you maybe not done before. I will remove the paper. You only need paper to paper piece, not for assembling. And the reason is, I cut off all that extra fabric and I will have the perfect piece. So why do you think we need paper in our seams? No, we don't want papers in our seams. When it's a straight line, I always use a ruler. And now I go on the inside. And again, I try to stay exactly on the line. We don't want to cut into the piece. When you have done this several times, you will not be afraid anymore. And you know, even when you make a mistake, we do have fabrics. We can make a copy on our printer of the templates and we can make a new piece. That's all that could happen, so don't worry. What I always like, when I cut off that extra fabric on the outside of my seams, and when I turn the piece, it looks so nice and crisp and well, clean. I think that is the right word for me. It looks clean to me. No, I'm not turning her. I'm not ready yet. Okay. This is what we will see. So they will join together here. And there she is. A beautiful piece. A2, well made, a perfect seam on the outside and the inside, and here is our star. So what I do, just to show you what we have done so far. So what do you think of this? I really like it. So my next step, I will bring the marks onto the fabric, and you can do it in many different ways, but I like to show you how I do it. And you know, I always use a regular pen. I know that my mark is here and here. So what I do, I use my pen. Just a little mark. It's just in the seam allowance. You can see it. It's less than an 8. The first what I do is the outside. There's my mark. And there's a mark. Can you see it? It's about an 1/8 of an inch. It's nothing more. It's on the inside of the piece. And every time when there's a mark, I will use a regular pen to mark her. About an 1/8 of an inch in the seam allowance. You do the same on the inside. It's a little bit hard to see. There she is. Don't forget any of the marks. The marks are extremely important when we start assembling the piece. And now I go back and I will do the inside. You know, the tiny marks are just enough. It's just a good reference. And especially the marks on the inside, they are important because all the star point seams, they will match. They will match here. And my next step, I will remove all the foundation papers. Every point I will take out. So, this is it. Now we take the papers out and then we start assembling. So, okay, I will be back and I'll show you what we do next. Okay, now it is the next step. The next step is that we sew these two parts, these two halves together, and we do it by closing this seam on the smallest part. And as you can see, you need a continuous circle, a continuous seam allowance on the outside and the inside. And as you can see, maybe it is hard to, I will call it my little V, here and here. So just pin it so you're absolutely sure that you do have that 1/4 inch seam allowance, because that is essential. We need a circle for the outside piece, but also for our star, because that will be our next step. So what we're going to do now, I already pinned it, and I have a leftover piece of my star point to stabilize it, because it is the bias where we start here. So I will use my little piece of paper to stabilize my stitching line. I always start with a tiny back stitch and I will end with a tiny back stitch. Before I remove my pins, I put my needle of the machine in the fabric. So again, it stabilizes your stitching line, because if I take my pin out, my perfect line is gone. So let's see how it turns out. When you're finished, you press the seam in the same direction as all your other seams, so nobody knows where you start or finish your circle. Okay, I use a regular stitch length. I bring down the needle of the machine. See, it's there. Now I can take the pin out. I do my tiny back stitch. And I take the second pin out, and I'm moving forwards, and I do my back stitch. Okay, this should be enough. I will trim the little thread off. This is what we have, a beautiful continuous seam. Okay, I will press it. And then I show you the next step, how we attach the circle and the star together. You will love the technique that I will demo, because the result is almost perfect, will be perfect. And I cut off my little ear on this side. Okay, this is what we have. Now the next step. What you need is your cover picture. And as you can see here, on the smallest one, it is the large white point. It's pointing there. On this side, you can see that the white point is pointing in the center of your white spike. We have marks. But always go back to the color chart, to your front cover, and it gives you a good idea how to position your star in a circle.